Freddy Got Fingered was the directorial debut of Tom Green, a Canadian comedian famous for trolling strangers on the street in his MTV show.
Going swimming?
Okay, because he's a polite security guard.
Okay. See, I'm a security enthusiast.
Okay.
So that's kind of neat to know. What, you're a polite security guard?
Freddy Got Fingered is the heartwarming story about an aspiring animator named Gord who moves to Los Angeles to try to make it in Hollywood and make his father proud. I can barely get through that sentence without laughing. Famously, the movie was totally panned upon release, it ruined Tom Green's career, and Roger Ebert gave the movie a rare 0-star rating and listed it as one of his most hated movies of all time.
Freddy Got Fingered with Tom Green. It's a vomitorium of a movie starring Green as Gord, an obnoxious retard who makes it his life's work to freak out his dad, played with teeth-gnashing scorn by Rip Torn.
You're absolutely right. This is ground zero. It has to be ground zero of bad comedies.
In his review, he said, "This movie doesn't scrape the bottom of the barrel. This movie isn't the bottom of the barrel. This movie isn't below the bottom of the barrel. This movie doesn't deserve to be mentioned in the same sentence as barrels." You have to feel bad for him. Starting in the mid-2010s, there's been a growing group of film critics and fans who think there's more to Freddy Got Fingered than its 5 Razzies, even claiming that it's a significant piece of Dadaist or Surrealist art.
When I made this movie, I didn't think that I was going to get this much, praise and adulation. From day one, when we started writing it, said we wanted to win a Raspberry Award. So I'm glad my dream has come true.
Today, I want to analyze Freddy Got Fingered, figure out what it is, why it is, and most importantly, determine, is it funny?
Even though I am completely on the anti-poster side of the fence, I don't feel guilty about putting up posters because, damn it, if they're allowed to put up posters, why the hell aren't we?
Some critics have labeled Freddy Got Fingered as a Dadaist masterpiece, referring to the Dadaist movement, which is a movement based around anti-art and the rejection of all tropes, cliches, and structures of mainstream art. But, as Kyle Colgren of Channel Awesome has said,
"This cannot be Dada! It's too normal to be Dada! It's too shit to be anything else!"
Freddy Got Fingered isn't Dada because it does fit into our society's classification of a movie. It is very obviously subverting tropes and cliches rather than rejecting them. In that same scathing review, Roger Ebert said that Freddy Got Fingered might be striving to be a surrealist art piece. Many years ago, when surrealism was new, Louis Brunel and Salvador Dali made Un Chien Andalou, a film so shocking that Brunel filled his pockets with stones to throw at the audience if it attacked him. Green, whose film is in the same surrealist tradition, may want to consider that same tactic. The day may come when Freddy Got Fingered is seen as a milestone of neo-surrealism. The day may never come when it is seen as funny. I watched Salvador Dali's Un Chien Andalou with the intention of trying to find evidence that Freddy Got Fingered is a representation of neo-surrealism. I have to admit, I didn't see a ton of similarities. I see why Roger Ebert would make that comparison, because Freddy Got Fingered is shocking, absurd, and irrational. And it does challenge the traditional form and function of the late 90s, early 2000s sex comedy. I don't think it was Tom Green's intent to create some abstract commentary on modern day raunchy comedies. I think he was sincerely trying to make a comedy to sincerely make people laugh and accidentally made a surrealist art piece.
Just buying some of these condoms here, because I'm planning on making love to a woman tonight.
Tom Green was riding high off his TV show and another movie he starred in called Road Trip, and studios were starting to approach him about creating a movie in which he starred in and wrote, but wouldn't direct. In an interview with Vice, Tom Green said that he had trouble getting buy-in for his ultimate vision. He went through many studios before getting any financial support for his film, and eventually decided to direct it himself because he couldn't find a director to agree on the tone. Again, I can barely get through that sentence without laughing. Fun fact, Tom Green also did all his own stunts for this movie, which is wild.
A very tense moment on the set of Freddy Got Fingered when we dropped a house on top of my body.
His original intent was to make a dark comedy. It was supposed to be grittier and more disturbing than what came out in the final cut, which is obvious when you look at some of the scenes out of context. The original movie was 30 minutes longer and had 5 extra scenes, which were all cut once the movie was shown to focus groups. Tom Green said these cuts drastically changed the plot of the film, making it more nonsensical, disjointed, and transformed the tone to a more standard comedy.
If you had to do Freddy Got Fingered over again, what would you do differently?
Honestly, I would have fought a little harder in the editorial stages, like in the editing stage, against some of the changes that I was asked to make because of focus groups. I had to basically change the entire story structure of that film because there was a gay kiss in the movie. But I guess this was almost 20 years ago now, 18 years ago, and so when I took that scene out, his whole story arc didn't really make sense. Which was like 5 scenes in the movie. Then the movie got very disjointed.
Tom Green was also struggling with testicular cancer at the time, which he said affected his performance and made him very edgy and aggressive.
I got a disease, right? Yeah. Cancer, right? Back in January, my right testicle started hurting, and I was kind of embarrassed, and I went to a doctor, and they immediately told me that it was cancer. They touched my testicle with their fingers, and he said it was cancer. I went in for surgery a couple of days later, and I had my right testicle removed.
I think all these elements combined contributed to the surrealist style that came out in the final cut of the film. The movie doesn't make any sense, no scene leads into another, because huge parts of the movie were left on the cutting room floor. The movie is simultaneously goofily mainstream, but also very dark and aggressive, probably because the editor had to change the tone at the final hour. The core plot of Freddy Got Fingered is actually super boilerplate and steals from every raunch comedy movie in the late 90s and early 2000s. For example, lovable slacker has a dream to be in Hollywood, bad relationship with the father that he's trying to prove himself to. He meets a generic blonde love interest who loves him for just being his loser self. The brother is the wet blanket nerd always competing for his father's affections. He takes these tropes, and it's almost as if he said, wouldn't it be funny if the protagonist was completely unlikable and jerked off horses and elephants? Wouldn't it be funny if his animations were about zebra centaurs facing xenophobia in America? My hooves! My hooves! Wouldn't it be funny if the dad was played by Rip Torn?
It's a treasure. Get out of my goddamn scuba gear, you imbecile!
Wouldn't it be funny if the love interest just kept talking about blowjobs and wanted to be caned and was a nurse/rocket scientist? Wouldn't it be funny if the wet blanket nerd had to go to an institution for abused children but he was 25? This is every element of the movie. There's a scene where Gord goes on a date with this blonde woman and it almost ends in a shootout and Gord gets arrested.
I say Geneva, you hear Helsinki, huh?
In a cliched, heartwarming, wacky scenario, Gord accidentally delivers a baby, but then hurls the baby around his head while people are chanting in the background and bites off the umbilical cord.
We saved the day.
Gord gives up on his dream at the stereotypical low point of the movie, but then is re-inspired when he sees his girlfriend on the news because she finally managed to build her rocket-powered wheelchair.
A local girl by the name of Betty Menger may not be able to walk, but it certainly hasn't slowed her down any. She's an amateur rocket scientist who designed a wheelchair that does 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds.
She did it.
Look at her go!
There's a scene between Gord and his dad, that classic scene that plagued every late 90s and early 2000s movie, where there was like the stereotypical like father-son bonding and understanding each other scene. But instead of it being heartwarming and sentimental, it's just Tom Green and Rip Torn yelling proud at each other for a couple minutes.
I am proud of you. Proud.
Every scene, every plot point, every part of this movie has the mentality of, what if we took this thing that everyone knows and recognizes and pushed it to 11 in a direction that no one would expect and no one asked for? I think the reason why there's so many people trying to reclassify the genre of Freddy Got Fingered is because there's an assumption that it isn't funny. It must be surrealist, because as Roger Ebert said, it's certainly not a comedy. But from Tom Green's own mouth, this movie is a comedy and it's meant to make people laugh.
You know, I write this stuff with my friend Derek, who's been writing, with me on my TV show for years, and we kind of, initially want to make sure that it kind of cracks us up and that we have fun and laugh at it. We tend to feel that possibly could make some other people happy and smile, perhaps chuckle even if we're lucky, or guffaw.
Notice the wording that Tom Green uses here. He uses the language laugh at it, a detached perspective, as if the audience is meant to laugh at or react to Tom Green, rather than laugh with him or be in on the joke. This has always been his shtick. Tom Green would do something bizarre or annoying, and the humor would come out of watching this random person react to him, rather than being in on the joke. I think Tom Green's cinematic version of that comedic style is to perform detached from the audience, and the audience reacts to whatever ridiculous stuff he can throw on the screen. And I think that sense of humor probably appeals to a very specific group of people, and if you aren't in that group of people, you probably can't stand it. This aggressive and chaotic style is pushed even further with the editing choices mandated by the studio, accidentally catapulting this movie into surrealist cinema, along with films like Eraserhead and The Holy Mountain. Freddy Got Fingered has experienced a warmer reevaluation recently when compared to the complete death of Tom Green's career when it initially released. And now that audiences have been exposed to comedians like Sacha Baron Cohen, Eric Andre, and virtually all internet comedy, it's a lot more obvious what Tom Green was trying to do. But at the time, the studio didn't understand Tom Green's comedic style and unintentionally elevated the film by trying to fit it into the standard comedy movie structure. Also with time, it's very obvious that those early 2000s sex comedies were terrible, and audiences are more on board with ripping those movies to shreds. These films appeal to the lowest common denominator. They are so formulaic, down to the movie posters. Also, those movies have received valid criticism around the homophobia, sexism, and racism present. So most of those films 20 years on have aged terribly. But back to my original question. Is Freddy Got Fingered funny? Personally, I think that Freddy Got Fingered is unironically one of the funniest movies I've ever seen. I love the jarring tone, the nonsense story, and Tom Green's performance is awesome.
I'm being creative? Now, if you'll excuse me, I still have some work to do.
Daddy, would you like some sausage? Daddy, would you like some sausages? Daddy, would you like some sausage? Sausages, sausages.
His vocal inflections and mannerisms in some of his lines.
I ordered a cheese sandwich and there's hardly any cheese in here.
That's no good, is it? Here, give me your sandwich. I will fix it for you. We can't have people complaining that there's not enough cheese in the cheese sandwiches now, can we? I mean, if there's no cheese in a cheese sandwich, it's basically just 2 slices of bread. If word of that were to get out, well, I could lose my job. I could lose all of this! And we wouldn't want that now, would we?
What human being talks like that? His performance absolutely makes it for me.
I wasn't expecting that to happen.
But this movie's comedy is very love it or hate it. And I was listening to a podcast recently called Sardonicast, where Ralph the Movie Maker perfectly pinpoints why this movie's comedy is so divisive.
Like, what am I even here for? Why am I even watching this? When you're watching it on real people, it's a joke on the people, like in the scene, and then also the comedian, because it's kind of like a secondhand embarrassment kind of thing. Like, oh my god, I can't believe Sacha Baron Cohen and this other guy are naked in this like hotel conference room or whatever the fuck. It's like a joke on me.
And I think that's why I find this movie so funny, is because I have no problem with the joke being on me.
Tasty corn. Tasty corn. Tasty corn. Mmm. Tasty corn.
Personal updates. As you've noticed, I have been away for a while. That's because I've been working on a new short film. Oh my god! It is currently in post-production. It is called Corporate Drone, and it's about a businesswoman who gets haunted by her home office. Ooh, spooky! Its main influences are movies like Hausu, The Evil Dead, and Videodrome. It's my most ambitious film yet. Lots of time, lots of money. So if you want to stay tuned for more updates, subscribe, like, ring bell for notifications, follow Instagram, Twitch, Twitter. Bye!